Today I'm going to share some recent news from Egypt. So there has been so much going on in Egypt, both in archaeological news and with new museums opening. And we're going to start with some of the excavations and archaeological findings that have been found recently. We're starting up here on the Mediterranean Sea at Alexandria. Just the week before last, archaeologists have been removing ancient statues, coins, pottery, and part of a merchant ship out of the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Alexandria. The items date to Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty, which lasted from 305 to 30 BCE, and the Roman period, which ended in 642 CE. So there are many artifacts that are underwater. You can see part of the excavation team here in diver suits. So some of the pieces are being lifted out and taken to museums, and others are just going to be left there because they're in their original position. Probably most of the items were affected by earthquakes in the past. So if it's not the sands that are covering up some of the mysteries of ancient Egypt, it's the water. There is just always something new to discover related to ancient Egypt. Next, we'll move to Saqqara, which is about 20 miles south of Cairo. And in April of this year, there was the discovery of the tomb of Prince Wasser ibn Ra, who was the son of King Userkaf, the first king of the fifth dynasty. So this is a very old tomb that was discovered this year. In January of this year, the tomb of Teti Nebfu was discovered near Saqqara. Among his many titles were chief palace physician, priest, and magician of the goddess Serket, who is the goddess of venomous creatures, chief dentist, and director of medicinal plants. And you can imagine the importance of someone who was the magician of a goddess who controlled venomous creatures such as snakes and scorpions. And this physician used medicinal plants as part of healing. Now, in 2021 at Saqqara, the funerary temple of Queen Nerit, the wife of Pharaoh Teti, was discovered next to the tomb of Teti. And Teti was a pharaoh from 2323 to 2291 BCE, so 4,300 years ago. And although this discovery was made 4 years ago in 2021, it's still really important and relevant today because of the findings after the initial discovery. Nearby, there were 52 burial shafts that reached from 30 to 36 feet deep. And inside, there were 300 wooden coffins with 100 mummies. So 100 new mummies were discovered dating back to the New Kingdom. And this was the first time that coffins dating to this period had been found in Saqqara, which is typically associated with much earlier kingships. These burial shafts held ancient inhabitants from the 18th and 19th dynasties, indicating a cult of Teti and his wife Neret that lasted for over 1,000 years. So this pharaoh and the queen were worshipped 1,000 years after they had passed on. And when the archaeologists found this, there were 52 burial shafts, and they began finding some of these wooden coffins, and they thought, oh, wow, maybe we'll get 50 coffins. And then they had 100 and 200, 300 coffins with 100 mummies were discovered. You can see how these are being organized. And there is the step pyramid in the background. This is from an even older period. Again, this is at Saqqara. Now, we may wonder, why are all these discoveries being made? The image on the left is from 1856, and you can see that the Sphinx is covered up to its neck in sand and debris and rubble, mostly sand. And then the image on the right shows what the Sphinx looks like today. So even just overnight, if you're out in the desert, there is a layer of sand on everything. So imagine after thousands of years, how much sand would build up. Also, some areas were kind of forgotten and neglected. This is Luxor Temple, and this shows an image from 1949. And here it is today after the debris was removed. The main reason that many of these discoveries can be made is because of recent technology. Here's satellite imagery. This shows the Giza Plateau with the three pyramids that we're very familiar with and the other pyramids nearby. So we're pretty familiar with satellite images, but there's so much more that's available. Muon scanning maps density differences within structures by measuring subatomic particles, muons, how they pass through. This creates an X-ray so that we can see what it looks like on the inside. And this amazing image is a muon scan showing the Great Pyramid. And if you look in the center, the big void, they're able to identify the big void there. So it creates an X-ray view of a monument to find hidden chambers. There's also 3D GIS modeling, and this is geographic information systems that are used to integrate 3D models with other archaeological data, allowing researchers to explore sites in virtual space and time. So it's models that then are integrated with what's already known about the area, about the archaeological site, so that it's like you're actually standing there. So this is a 3D GIS model. There's also 3D scanning and printing. Archaeologists use laser and structured light 3D scanners to create millimeter accurate digital replicas of artifacts and monuments without touching them. And in this case, it's not just a digital replica. The artifact that you see on the left was created for the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum by a team of researchers who scanned the real artifact over on the right. On the right-hand side, that's the actual ancient artifact. And on the left, as a thank you, they did a 3D print of that same artifact. And you can get down to exactly how something looks. Again, either a digital replica so that you can move it on your computer as though you're holding it in your hands, or it can be printed and made into that artifact on the left is sitting on my desk. Not artifact, that 3D print is sitting on my desk. It is an actual object that was printed from the 3D scan of the real artifact on the right. There's also LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging, which uses pulsed laser light to create high-resolution 3D digital elevation models of the terrain. And you can see the example below. There's a lower res topography, and then there's LiDAR, which is much clearer, much more detailed. Robots are being used as part of archaeology, and this is part of the research from the University of Leeds, where they sent a robot into a shaft within the Great Pyramid. And robots are being used in archaeology all over the world, especially to reach hard to reach locations. Then there is GPR, which is ground penetrating radar. It uses radar pulses to image subsurface features and anomalies, such as tombs, walls, and foundations. GPR is ideal for targeting specific areas for excavation, making the process more efficient. So this image down below where I placed the arrow, this shows that there is a structure underneath with a domed roof. It's underground, but this ground penetrating radar shows that there's an unusual structure under there. And then archaeologists can decide if this is a good place to excavate. So it's not so much a hit and miss. You can have this data to know the likelihood of finding something under that particular part of sand. Then there's electrical resistivity tomography. It maps subsurface resistivity variations, which can reveal deeper structures not detected by radar. There's magnetometry. It detects variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by features like ancient kilns, hearths, and even mud brick walls. It is a highly effective, non-invasive tool for initial site surveys. So again, deciding, is this a good place to start our excavation? Then there's DNA analysis, which reveals genetic makeup, relatives, diet, health, and much more. And this is King Tut's golden mask, and King Tut's mummy was discovered in his tomb. In fact, it's still in his tomb. All the artifacts were removed, but his mummy is still in the original tomb in the Valley of the Kings. And for a long time, it was believed that Tut might have been Akhenaten's unrelated son-in-law. But through genetic analysis, DNA analysis, it was found that he had a much closer family relationship. At the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum, we did CT scanning of the mummy that you see here on the right. We had this mummy in the museum for 75 years, and we didn't know anything about her. So we worked with Stanford University and NASA Biocomputational Lab and a whole group of people, really experts in their field, who volunteered their time to do CT scans of this mummy. It would have been unethical to unwrap that mummy on the right, but digitally, we were able to see what was inside the wrappings. On the left, you can see the outline. You can see a girl's face, and that's the outside of the cartonnage here on the right. And then you see a skeleton. And she was young, so this sarcophagus might have been made very quickly for her. They know that she died quickly, probably from meningitis. And so they had to fit her in whatever sarcophagus was available. And you can see they kind of jammed her in there, but there's nothing to indicate that she had any health issues until the meningitis. And the CT scanning in the center, you can see her baby teeth, and then above that, you can see her adult teeth that are about to come out. And so that's why she was estimated to be 4.5 and 6 years old. So this research is in a special exhibit at the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. So all of this technology gives archaeologists tools that they didn't have available in the past. So now we're going to move to the next location for recent discoveries, and that's Abydos. In January of this year, Penn Museum, which is the museum associated with the University of Pennsylvania, discovered a massive tomb of an unnamed pharaoh at the ancient necropolis of Anubis Mountain, shedding new light on a long-lost dynasty. The king once buried in this tomb has yet to be identified. They reigned during the Second Intermediate Period, which is from 1640 to 1540 BCE, so 3,500 years ago. And there is, on the ceiling, there is a cartouche, but in ancient times, someone took the name out of the cartouche. That's where you would have seen, where you would have found the name of the king. And that's reserved only for kings. So they know that this was a royal tomb. So more to come from this discovery. And look, you can see how far under the sand this was. Now we go down to Luxor. And this is a huge discovery. In 2022, the tomb of Tutmosis II was discovered, but it wasn't identified until this year as being the tomb of Tutmosis II. No one was sure whose tomb this was. And this is important. This may be the last undiscovered tomb of the 18th dynasty. And I say that it may be because this tomb was probably not used. You can see on the image on the left how far down it is here. And water, and the image on the right, water in ancient times came in that opening and created what we see here on the left now. The tomb was just filled with rubble. The image on the right shows the tomb after it's been cleared out. And the archaeologists believe that because it flooded while Tutmosis very early on, either while Tutmosis II was still alive and they were preparing, or after he died, that they chose a second location that has not yet been located. And it's believed that the mummy of Tutmosis II has been found, and it's part of the place where they're honored in the new the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. But some people are contesting whether that is really the mummy of Tutmosis II, or if there's one more tomb that might exist that hasn't been found yet. So there are all these fascinating mysteries. Now, this discovery was in 2021, and they're continuing to excavate it, so more and more is visible now. I included it in recent news because it's just so important. This is the Lost Golden City, which in ancient Egyptian was Saud Atun, the rise of the Aten. And this is outside the Valley of the Kings, and it's the largest city that has been found in Egypt. Archaeologists have hailed the discovery of what is believed to be the largest ancient city found in Egypt, buried under sand for millennia, which experts said is one of the most important finds since the unearthing of Tutankhamun's tomb. So this is a massive discovery. Sometimes referred to as the rise of Aten, this 3,400-year-old tomb dates to the reign of Imhotep III. It includes intact houses, tools, pottery, and jewelry, offering insights into daily life. Other big news from Luxor is that the Avenue of the Sphinxes, stretching 1.7 miles between Luxor and Karnak temples, has been completely excavated and was reopened in a grand ceremony. Lined with over 1,000 Sphinx statues, this avenue was once part of the Opet festival, where the image of Amun-Ra was carried in procession. So this is the amazing way that it looks now. There was an avenue connecting Luxor temple that you see here with Karnak temple that would be behind in this photo. And there were over 1,000 of these sphinxes that were lining this avenue through which in ancient times, once a year, there was a special procession. So here is what Luxor Temple looked like in 1848. The famous painter David Roberts painted this image of Luxor Temple as he saw it in 1848. And you can see that it's filled in a lot with sand, and this wasn't an important structure to people of that time. They had built a mosque on top of the ruins. At other times, there was a church. So some of these ancient ruins were just really disregarded. Others were covered with sand, so you didn't even know they were there. So this was in 1848, but it came even more covered 100 years later. This image is from 1949. And you can see that it's overgrown and it just wasn't important to the people at the time. Here's another image. You can see a couple of just parts of the Sphinx. So right in the center bottom, the head of that Sphinx is missing, but that's the beginning of the avenue that goes from Luxor Temple that's here to Karnak Temple to the left. And here is what it looks like today. It's massive and magnificent. So here are the two together. And this is Dr. Mohammed Zakaria, who was responsible for the first excavations in 1949. And you can see how much sand and rubble had built up. Let's say well, we can just use a rough figure. Let's say a little above his head might be 6 feet. And there's probably at least another 4 or 5 feet of rubble above his head. And the Sphinx on the left had to be excavated. So here's what one of the sphinxes looks like. They all would have looked similar. On the left, that's the actual ancient sphinx. And on the right, it shows how it would have been painted in ancient times, which would have made for a very impressive promenade. So here is the Avenue of the Sphinxes. And this is a replica of the bark, the ship that would have been used to move the statue from one temple to another. So now we'll explore some museum news. And there has been so much museum news in Egypt. It's amazing. This little museum is right outside of the step pyramid that I showed you earlier in Saqqara. It opened in 2006, but it was renovated in 2023. And if you ever travel to Saqqara, be sure to go to this museum. It is so well done. And again, here is the step pyramid that's right next to it. And this museum includes artifacts from the step pyramid. Underneath this, there are tunnels that were something like, I think it's like 3.7 miles of tunnel, something like that, underneath this structure, which is the oldest pyramid in the world. And those tunnels, these hallways, these underground hallways, were lined with these little tiles that you can see. This aqua colored tile is called faience, and it's ceramic. And the idea was nobody was going to see this. This was the tomb for King Zoser. And they wanted to make it like a palace that he could enjoy in the afterlife. So they made it palatial and included on the wall mats that would have looked like this. They would have been made out of reed. So that's what the faience tiles are meant to imitate. And these line the corridors. Of course, there was no electricity down there at the time. All of these tiles are glazed, and you can imagine what that would have looked like for an ancient person who would have been down there with a torch, and just to see the way that those would glimmer. So we were just in Saqqara for the Imhotep Museum, and now we're going to some of the museums in Cairo. This is the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. It opened with great fanfare in 2021. It is a magnificent, beautiful museum. Previously, the remains of 20 pharaohs were housed in the old Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And they were not given the complete respect that they are given now in this new museum. So there was a grand procession moving these mummies from the old Egyptian museum to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. And each pharaoh was taken in a vehicle like this that was greeted by the president of Egypt. So you can imagine the current president of a country welcoming the previous rulers of their nation. And of course, they were controlled, the vehicles were controlled for vibration and for temperature. And there was huge celebration and ceremony moving these pharaohs from the old Egyptian Museum to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. And you can find videos of this online. It's really just amazing. This is the old Egyptian Museum, and I'm going to talk about it more later. But I remember seeing these cases that you see on the upper level here. And one day I was looking at the names of all of the people whose bodies had been mummified who were in these cases. And I looked and I said, my gosh, this is Tutmosis III. He's one of the most powerful rulers in history, and he was just kind of stacked up there in this gallery. So it's certainly expressing great respect for these former leaders of Egypt. And the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization is very high-tech, very beautiful, really well organized and well presented. This is above the area where you go down to see the mummified remains of the pharaohs. There are 18 kings and 2 queens from the 17th to the 20th dynasties. And these people were so important in their time. Amos Nefertari, Hatshepsut, Tutmosis III, Amenhotep III, Queen T, Seti I, Ramses II, Seti II. So 20 people altogether. And this is a display of hieroglyphs that really they have such a brilliant use of technology in this museum. They also have the skeleton of a man who lived 33,000 years ago in a place called Nazlet Khater in Upper Egypt. And they know a lot about this person. His back was curved in a way of someone who did a lot of manual labor. And there's a lot that can be told from the bones, from the teeth. So this really connects you with somebody who lived 33,000 years ago and what their life might have been like. And then the display that you see around there, it shows flints and arrowheads as they developed over hundreds and thousands of years. And that we're still in the museum of the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and this is Pharaoh Hatshepsut. And this is a statue of Akhenaten, and they've displayed this statue that they've had to piece together next to his famous hymn to Aten. That's a huge statue. Now we need a drum roll. Welcome to the Grand Egyptian Museum. And this museum is grand in every way. I'm going to choose this as my second favorite museum in the world now. Of course, the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum will always be my favorite museum. And you can see the setting here. So it's the museum in the front and the Giza Plateau with the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids right there on the horizon. This amazing museum has 100,000 artifacts, including an axe that is estimated to be 700,000 years old. 2 previously submerged statues from Alexandria of a Ptolemaic king and queen are included in the collection. The museum has 5,340 artifacts related to King Tutankhamun. And it also has Pharaoh Khufu's solar boat. I'll mention a little more about these now. So when we enter this new museum, we're welcomed by the Pharaoh Ramses II. And Ramses ruled for 66 years. He was known as Ramses the Great. He is very well known for the temple at Abu Simbel that he built along the Nile to intimidate people who might be coming up the Nile to see what a grand, important, powerful person he was. And this statue had been outside at the Cairo train station for decades, and the air was eating away at the statue. So when you enter the new Grand Egyptian Museum, we're greeted by this magnificent statue of Ramses II. And this gives you an idea of how massive it is. This is the outside of the museum, and there are cartouches that are on the exterior that have the names of pharaohs. Anytime you see an oval like that with hieroglyphs on the inside, it's the name of a pharaoh. And these are placed in family groups. Most of the dynasties in ancient Egypt were passed through the family, usually from a father to a son. And so these are placed here by family group. And this is that same thing seen from the inside. And I placed this arrow here to show you this little window. The museum was designed so that the sun would shine through this little window onto the statue of Ramses II, who's right here at the entrance, twice per year, on his birthday and on his coronation day. And some of you probably know why the experts who created this museum chose to honor Ramses II in this way. This is the temple of Ramses at Abu Simbel that I just told you about. That when the Aswan Dam was built, creating Lake Nasser, it dammed up the Nile purposely and created this massive lake. That lake was going to flood this temple. So it was a huge international project to move this statue, to cut it up and move it back from the Nile and up on a hill. And this is actually placed on the front of a man-made dome. The original location of Abu Simbel would be behind what we're looking at and down. That's where the Nile River would have been, but it's now a lake that is higher than the Nile. So it would have flooded this. And the original temple was built so that twice a year, the sun would shine through this door that you see in the center of the photo and illuminate the Holy of Holies in Ramses' temple. So the ancient Egyptians had that advanced knowledge of astronomy and architecture to be able to build this temple so that twice a year the sun went through the front door of the temple into the Holy of Holies. When it was moved, they knew that this happened, but when it was moved, they were only able to get it within 1 day. When the temple was moved back and up on the hill, the sun still shines and enters into the Holy of Holies, but it's now 1 day off. So the Grand Egyptian Museum has created this window that shines light onto the statue of Ramses II on the exact days, on his birthday and his coronation day. This is the grand stairway as you enter the Grand Egyptian Museum. It's a massive museum giving plenty of space to really appreciate the different artifacts that are here. When you get to the top of this stairway at the top of the museum, this is the view of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. As I mentioned, the artifacts related to King Tutankhamun, King Tut, are going to be moved into the Grand Egyptian Museum. Right now, some of them are still in the old museum, but the official final opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum is November 1st, 2025. So at that time, this gold mask that's right now in the old Cairo Museum, the old Egyptian Museum, will be there as part of the complete collection of artifacts related to King Tut. Also at the Grand Egyptian Museum is Pharaoh Khufu's solar boat. This is an image, a photograph of the Great Pyramid. And over to the left, you see the arrow. It's pointing to what used to be a museum. In that location, 23 feet under sand in the 1960s, and archaeologists found a massive boat that had been disassembled into 1,224 pieces. This was a boat that was intended to take Pharaoh Khufu of the Great Pyramid, to take him through the sky on his journey to the afterlife. It was a magical boat for the pharaoh. So this was discovered in this location to the left. It was assembled and a museum was built there so that you could go and see this amazing boat. That is Khufu's solar boat. And it was believed that he would have stepped onto this and ridden through the sky to the afterlife. So this boat has been moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum. And the museum next to the Great Pyramid is closed now. The boat's not there, and the boat is now in the Grand Egyptian Museum. It was taken through another special procession, taking this boat from the side of the Great Pyramid, where it was buried thousands of years ago, taking it very carefully to the new Grand Egyptian Museum. That too is not on display yet. They're still doing research on it. I'm not sure if that's going to be open on November 1st. I know the King Tut artifacts will be available then. I'm not sure if they'll still be doing research because they've been doing research on the boat for several years. I'm not sure if that will also be open on November 1st. But the grand opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum is November 1st. So now we come to the Egyptian Museum. And you're probably familiar with this image. This museum was built in 1902, and a lot of the artifacts that I've just spoken about were in this museum previously, including King Tut's artifacts. In fact, many of King Tut's artifacts are still there right now, but they will be in the new Grand Egyptian Museum by November 1st. And an image that often reminds me of the importance of the Egyptian Museum is from 2011 during the revolution in Egypt when looters broke into the Egyptian Museum. And people from Cairo came and formed a human chain so that people could not break into the Egyptian Museum. And this is what it looks like today. It's a beautiful building. This is the main gallery when you walk in the front door and go straight ahead. And it looks remarkably different from just a few years ago because it's much emptier than it was before. Before, it seemed like every square inch, something was jammed into every square inch. It was so jam-packed with artifacts, and many of these won't be here in a short period. The Egyptian Museum, this one built in 1902, is going to focus on some different areas. This is the gallery dedicated to Pharaoh Akhenaten, and that will be moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum. The Egyptian Museum will feature 4 exhibition collections. Pre-dynastic, so before the first pharaohs, so that's over 5,200 years ago. Pre-dynastic, the Old Kingdom, Greco-Roman, and Tanis. And Tanis was the center of Egypt for hundreds of years, and then it was abandoned. And even though really important findings were discovered in Tanis, it's always been overshadowed by King Tut. But already in the Egyptian Museum, they have some of the artifacts, including sarcophagi made of silver, and silver was more valuable than gold in ancient Egypt. So they have this amazing collection that will be part of the Egyptian Museum going forward. So that completes our tour of the recent discoveries, recent news from Egypt, and both in archaeology as well as in museums. Many of us have on our list of things to do in this lifetime experiencing Egypt. I can remember as a small child, my dad had given my mom a little bust of Nefertiti. And I was so young, I remember I was at eye level with this bust. It was on a table. And I can remember looking at her face and wondering, who was this person? And there's just something about Egypt that intrigues us and keeps intriguing us because sands cover up what was so important in the past. Recently, an Egyptologist told me that they estimate that only 10% of the treasures and monuments and everything related to ancient Egypt has been discovered so far. So she still holds many secrets. And if Egypt is a place that you'd like to go, I just wish you all the best that you're able to make that amazing journey. So thank you very much.